Yaacov, thank you so much for joining FF News' coverage of the Paris Fintech Forum. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure. And we can't think of a better place to host this than here in Paris for the event.
Paris.
Right? It's such an incredible event location. How have you found it so far?
It was wonderful. The truth is the garden was so beautiful that it made networking inside of the whole bunch harder. But we were able to pull each other out to the garden. And this has been gorgeous.
And the networking outside has been absolutely brilliant, especially with the champagne lunches and everything. Now, Yaacov, could you please tell our audience a bit more about yourself and your organization, please?
Sure. So the name is Yaacov Martin. I'm the CEO of Jifiti. Jifiti enables various types of financial products at point of sale. That includes buy now, pay later, but we'll speak about that in a little bit.
Yeah.
We work primarily with banks, financial institutions, and global merchants to make these type of financial products available when and where they matter most.
That's absolutely amazing. One of the best things about fintech is the democratization of various different financial products. Lending is one of them. And now we're starting to see it actually be applied at point of sale, even better. You don't have to think about it anymore. So could you tell us some of the most exciting innovations within the buy now, pay later space that are really getting you guys excited?
Sure. So we've actually been through a very, very interesting ride. And I'm not speaking about Jifiti necessarily, but the industry as a whole. We've now completed a few years up until, I would say, the middle or beginning of last year, where we saw this tremendous rise in the usage of buy now, pay later, in the demand for buy now, pay later, but essentially, again, stripping it away from one specific product or another. As you said, the democratization of these financial products or making them accessible. Yeah. And I believe that access is really the key term here. So we'll touch on that maybe in just a few moments from a few different angles.
Please. Yeah, so with that in mind then, accessibility, as you said, is one of the key most elements to it. For a business, for instance, a lot of people aren't even aware that buy now, pay later can be applied to them. How does accessibility work in that function?
So it's interesting. To a certain degree, it started off with consumer, because there was a very vocal demand for it. You have merchants who are interested in obviously converting the sales. Mm-hmm. You have consumers who would like to consume, and the demand was very natural. On the other hand, with regard to consumer lending, I'll say, consumer lending is pretty standardized. At least in Western countries, you usually have the equivalent of the FICO score in North America. Yeah. And some of the buy now, pay laters weren't necessarily going through an entire underwriting process, but nevertheless, making certain determinations with regard to credit eligibility was simpler. The regulator obviously thought, and rightfully so, that in some of the areas it was lacking, and therefore that is changing as well. When we move over to business, it becomes much, much more sophisticated, not to say complicated. Underwriting a business is an art and a science. Yeah. And I think that's what we're seeing the emergence of. We today play a very active role in that. We're big believers that the B2B space is going to grow exponentially. I believe it's going to grow in a much more responsible fashion.
Yeah. You really touch on it in this kind of science, art, quasi-dimensional concept, in the fact that you can use data-driven concepts, but you still have a human, I'm sure, right at that element, providing this nuanced approach to underwriting an organization, right? Is that where you guys come in?
So there's definitely the human element in designing and building that type of algorithm. Yeah. First of all, those data sources have to be located. They have to be identified. Yeah. What is the data that you really need in order to extend various types of financial products to businesses? What do businesses need? One of my colleagues on the panel that I joined just about an hour ago was speaking about the fact that in his industry, many of the businesses are not necessarily looking for long-term installment loans, but rather just a seamless way to pay the bill through their finance department as seamlessly as it would be for them as a consumer to transact with a credit card. Nevertheless, there are definitely segments of the industry that require a longer-term type of financial plan.
Sure.
And building those type of risk algorithms and underwriting systems is where the art and the science comes in.
I can imagine, and I can't even imagine the data points that you have to deal with, these organizations have to provide to create that nuanced approach. But liquidity is such an important thing, naturally, and it's almost something that businesses have been underserved or undersold on is the fact that so many small businesses could have survived and thrived had they just been able to receive funds from maybe some of their larger, more boisterous clients in an acceptable time frame.
You're touching on the heart of it all, the soul, I would say, even of this part of the industry. If you think about the whole buy now, pay later explosion in the consumer world, it was very consumerism oriented.
Yeah.
So in other words, you had 16-year-olds who were buying their 10th pair of sneakers using a buy now, pay later. One of the reasons that we're finding this move into B2B to be so significant is because what are you ultimately doing by giving these small businesses access to capital? You're allowing them to grow their business. Yeah. You're allowing them to thrive. You're allowing them maybe to survive. You're allowing them to employ additional people. You're allowing them to put food on the table. So from a value perspective, first of all, that gets us out of bed in the morning. How can we really support these type of businesses that later can maybe grow to be very large businesses? The underwriting as well, it is much, much more responsible than some of what was going on in some of the pockets of the buy now, pay later industry, where basically if you had a pulse, you were approved.
Yeah.
Here, as I said before, you're collating actually all of these data points and making an informed decision. So this is here to stay. And this is going to be, in my opinion, the next evolution of this whole buy now, pay later explosion in a very responsible, moral and ethical fashion.
It's amazing. It's, as you said, it's just almost less risky because the money's there. There's so many more data points than what a 16-year-old's kind of financial transaction history is going to provide. And that alone, that's got to get some of the large institutions' mouths watering, right?
Yeah. It is true. We are also seeing it, if we speak about access, we're seeing it to be so much more nuanced than the consumer space. In the consumer space, you basically have two touch points.
Yeah.
You have an online e-commerce site and you have an in-store experience. Both, by the way, which we are very much involved in. And the global merchants that we serve today have a significant portion of their activity take place in store and another significant portion taking place online. And we have to create seamless type of experiences. But the minute you go into the B2B world, you're speaking about many, many more touch points. Procurement systems, ordering systems. You buy product off a truck. How do we make finance available wherever it really can move the needle on both sales for a corporate, but also on the way that these small businesses plan and prepare their future? So they don't live hand to mouth, they're able to invest and grow.
This is amazing. And I've got to ask, is there an emerging markets play as well? A lot of those organizations and a lot of those countries and people, the organizations within those countries, must be operating on such a paper-based system that suddenly when they see systems like this, it must change their lives.
Very interesting. So the answer is absolutely yes. And that is for, I would say, at least three reasons.
Yeah.
Number one is when you think about the B2B industry, and you're speaking about a manufacturer, a corporate, a distributor, that distributes to small businesses, and they are incentivized to make these type of payment plans available to their small business clients as much as the small business client would like to have the access so that they can stock up, so that they can expand, and so on and so forth. Meaning the motivation comes from both sides. Many of these very, very large corporates are global. And many of them have their greatest performing markets in the emerging markets. So the motivation is absolutely there. Number two, we spoke before about the fact that for small businesses, you actually have to design the risk and the underwriting type of algorithms and play.
Yeah. And
therefore, in emerging markets where you don't necessarily have the same sort of standard of scoring, you in the business-to-business world would anyway go ahead and find those data points that can serve or inform the underwriter in order to make an informed credit decision. So therefore, emerging markets actually works well with the type of B2B play.
Yeah.
And third, I would just say, and this is probably a general comment, we've seen this in many, many industries where the emerging markets sometimes leapfrog, right? So once upon a time, they didn't have access maybe because they were underbanked or they didn't have access to a bank and so on and so forth. But just like the landline and the cellular phone, there's the potential there of going straight to a situation where I like to call it, instead of them having to go to the bank, which may not be in their vicinity or at their within their reach, we bring the bank to the business.
Yeah. So Yaacov, it's such an exciting play to see those emerging economies really leapfrog some of the traditional ones, and I can't wait to see what happens there. Now, we're here in the Paris Fintech Forum. How's it been for you being surrounded by other C-suite executives?
First of all, it's always great to be able to exchange ideas. Today, I found my panel members to be enlightening, and even though they operate in the markets that we operate in, and in either the same industries or similar industries, getting another point of view is exactly what makes us so much better. Obviously, there's always room for collaboration, and I think we found that even with our direct competitors, so that's been absolutely wonderful.
Superb.
So all in all, I'm extremely happy to be here.
Yaacov, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Same here.